Hey everyone, welcome to Fuck, Marry, Kill. This is a brand new podcast from SisterSong, Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. And I am here with wonderful content creator and author Blair Imani and Monica Simpson, who is the executive director of SisterSong. Thank you both so much for being here for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And we're gonna be talking about voting today.
Let's go.
Which is a wildly, imminently important topic that we need to be discussing. So I'm really excited to get both of your perspectives on this topic. So do you want to start by giving us a little introduction about who you are and what your relationship to voting is?
Okay. I think my story for voting, I always have to give honor where honor is due, really starts with my grandmother. So I grew up in rural North Carolina, and my grandmother was a poll worker. And she was one of the first people in her community to actually register people to vote in her home, which was my childhood home as well. And so I grew up with this energy of voting and the importance of voting all around me. And so I've carried that through all the work that I've done through all the different social justice movements I've been a part of that has now landed me at my political home, which is in reproductive justice. So when I think about where we are politically in this moment and what is at stake and what is on the ballot, it is obvious that bodily autonomy, but abortion access, that all of the things that are directly connected to the work that we do at SisterSong every day is front and center. So I'm bringing that ancestral energy, but I'm also like in the real time moment of being so energized by this moment that we're in and wanting to make sure that we really push that energy in the ways that we need to.
Absolutely. I think that's really what this moment in time is about, is trying to meet that moment, meet that energy.
Yeah.
And I feel so mobilized for it. And I'm so excited to see so many folks from all different avenues of my life. I also work in reproductive health, but mostly in bodily autonomy advocacy. I now create a show called Smarter in Seconds, where I have made so much civic action education. It brought me to, be able to go to the convention earlier this year, which was really awesome. But really just to talk to people about how important it is not just to look at the top of the ticket, but voting up and down the ballot. I grew up with my dad sitting all of us at the, family, dinner table when we would be time to fill out our little mail-in ballots, especially during the pandemic, looking at the voter guides, making sure that we're making decisions. And we might not always vote the same way, but we're always voting in an informed way. And I think that the most important thing about voting this cycle has been previous conversations have been really dismissive of different populations, that, oh, Black folks don't want to vote because we don't want to do jury duty, a real thing that I was told by a civic action lead at a different organization, and or that young people are just apathetic to vote. This time, I think people are just realizing, let's just make the information available instead of counting people out from the process before it even happens, because we know that gerrymandering will, we know that the electoral system might, but if we can get people mobilized and educated about what voting looks like, how it can look like for them, to make a plan, to get to the polls, or to mail in their ballots, that's going to be more effective, and it has been more effective. We've seen hundreds of thousands of new voters being registered in a way where previously they might have been counted out before anybody even told them, hey, this is how you register to begin with.
Totally. Yeah. I love that. I really appreciate the context that you're giving too in regards to voting being part of this political ecosystem. It's not just this 1 month that we talk about voting. It's something that impacts our lives all throughout the year, something that every time we're talking about issues that are impacting our lives, it's going to be on the ballot in one way or another. And so being able to see it as part of this bigger structure that's created.
Yes.
And so before we get more into voting, I want to hear, we're going to play Fuck, Marry, Kill, right? And so that is the premise of this podcast, is that before every topic that we dive into, we play a relevant game of Fuck, Marry, Kill. I know I've gotten to play with you before. Blair, have you played Fuck, Marry, Kill before?
I don't even think I've played that in my life before.
Really?
So it'll be a first time for everything.
Wait, that's genuine. That's shocking to me, I'll be honest. Okay, I'm honored. But do you know the premise?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Okay, great. Fuck, Marry, Kill. Joe Biden dropping out of the presidential election. When a thoughty bar holds an election watch party, and is Kamala brat?
I have a question first. What is brat?
What is brat?
Ooh, we can get smarter in seconds about brat.
Oh my gosh, because I have no idea what that is.
Ooh, I'm here for you.
Okay.
So brat is not just the name of an album by Charlie XCX.
Okay.
It's also kind of this movement, and it's been kind of very much coded. It's a lime green with this, I think, Arial font. Graphic designers, don't come after me. But it's basically this very simple, album cover, lime green with black text, but it also represents how over-engineered so many campaigns have become, so many messages have been, so many album rollouts have been, where it just, people are tired of the industry plans. And so it's, a push away from that, but it's also, the music itself is very much about not necessarily making the best decisions for yourself, but living in the moment, having a good time, but then ultimately finding who you are throughout that. It has been this phenomenon, particularly within Gen Z, even though I don't believe the artist herself is part of Gen Z, but that's okay. Sometimes we mix and mingle. And the, Kamala's campaign has completely, latched onto it, along with memes and meme culture. And I think that's also something really important is to say, like, regardless of the campaign, looking at where the young people are getting their information, delivering it to them, figuring out what the young people want to see culturally, getting into that, and then, messaging it in a way where you can turn out votes. So Brat is, I don't know, a phenomenon, but it's also like, I don't know, it's just very much a sign of the times. I don't know what I could compare it to, but I'm sure there's been like moments and eras that we could like draw parallels. So
okay,
smarter in seconds.
That was really that was so good. That was so much better. I was gonna be like, lime green album, like, but yeah, it's like kind of, it's so much more than just the music. It's like this value stance that's been placed on it too. Yeah, like Kamala being Brat has just been this opportunity for young people to kind of speak our language and speak the way that we speak to each other, and then bring that into the political world. So it's really cool. I'll be honest, I'm a little sick of Brat summer. It's been Brat summer for.
Now it's Demure fall.
It's Demure. So Brat is kind of the opposite of Demure.
Opposite of Demure, because I got Demure. I was like, okay, I can follow this trend. I'm a fine ass auntie. This is for the fine ass aunties out here. It's okay. It's for the fine ass aunties. We had to understand what Brat was. I'm ready now. I'm ready for the game.
Ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, so fuck, marry, kill, Joe Biden dropping out of presidential election, when your thoughty bar has an election debate, watch party, and is Kamala Brat.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to, oh my goodness, can I cuss? Wow. Okay.
It's called fuck, marry, kill. You can do it like us.
I will kill the thoughty bar. And why? Because I don't love a dive bar. I'm really frustrated. I live in Los Angeles that like all of the like cool like queer like progressive bars are also dive bars. That's for some people. I love that. But I would like a little can we have like a tea time? Like, I don't know, like not tea time, but like, drink. Anyway, so that, and then marry Joe Biden dropping out. Delicious. Love to see it. And then Kamala being Brat, fuck, in a good way. Because I think it's like, it's really, it's motivating people. And I love to see that. And it's just like, is it cringe? Sure, also. But it felt so integrated into the campaign. And I think what's really important to name is that it's digital strategists behind it. People are like, oh, some intern? No. These interns are grown up and they know digital strategy and they are Gen Z and they know how to speak to their own folks. And so that's exciting.
I love that. It's giving, like, when people just hate on things because young girls like it, or just hating on things because young people, period, like it. Like, no, you're right. That was a digital strategist. It's not some teenager in their bedroom.
Well, it was probably a teenage digital strategist.
A teenager in their bedroom doing digital strategy. Yeah. You can have it all.
A salaried teenager.
There we go. Economic justice, good people. I really loved your answers. Thank you for going first. So I'm going to kill Joe Biden dropping out because I'm just tired of talking about it. No. That's my reason. Okay. Yeah. My reason is it's done. We moved on. Thank you, Joe. Let's keep going. So I'm just going to kill that off so we can just get that out of the talking points and stuff. It's gone. All right. I'm going to fuck the dive bar, like the dive bar watch party, because it's just a good time. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna bring that energy into the dive bar. So I'm gonna fuck with that, and I'm gonna marry this Brat, Kamala is Brat thing, because it feels like now that I know what Brat is, I'm like I can really get into this, and I have a lot of reasons as to why I would want to do that, but I'll hold those to my personal self. I'm going to marry it. You just met her. You literally just met her, and you're already marrying her. And she's also like my sorority sister. So anyway, there's like a lot of things that's there. So I'm just going to marry that because it feels like love.
Okay. Well, half Indian girlies are, because Charlie XCX is also half Indian.
Kamala's
half Indian.
Yep,
half
Indian
right. Girlies are having a season.
Y'all are on the map.
Beautiful. Okay, so I would love to talk about how the election is less than 50 days away. We are in crunch time. So what do you think is the most important thing for voters to know right now?
Yeah, I think you spoke to this a little bit earlier. Like, it is important for folks to know that we have to do it, right? Like, this is not a time for us to not be in these streets, to not be at our precincts, to not get our people out to make sure that they have a way to get there, for us not to have a plan. Like, this is the time for turnout to be at record numbers. I'm very excited about what it would feel like election day for these numbers to troll in, and we see that we have the most monumental election of our time. I believe that will speak volumes to where we are as a country, and I think it will help us think about the energy or just like use that energy to move us forward in a positive way, right? So I just feel like this is the time, in this moment, there's a lot that we can always grapple with. Like, I believe political struggle is important to movement building. It's important for us to think about how we build better solutions and all the different things. And in less than 50 days, we have to make a decision, right? And so this is the time for us to not allow ourselves to miss the mark on this moment. So that's what I'm like really holding fast to.
All right, Blair, do you want to weigh in? What do you think voters need to know now that we're 50 days out?
I think that voters really need to get into the ballot initiatives and really understand what that means. And like, you know, I think it's one thing to say do this, but it's another thing to explain what that means. And so essentially, you know, we have the presidential election. You have your, you know, you might have a senator who's running, but we also have all of the House of Representative seats for your district. So know about those things, know what they stand for. If you don't know, give it a Google, make sure it's a reputable source. But a lot of them are very proud to be standing on nonsense, but proud to be standing on business. So you just kind of know, you have to know where it is. These ballot initiatives, this can dictate the roads that are going to be built or fixed in your neighborhood, the drinking water, school board. Are these people Moms for Liberty people where they're trying to do book bans? Because it's only 1% of the American population that is doing book bans, 2% of people who are trying to fight the book bans, and then literally everybody else who's just kind of like minding their business, you know, kind of probably frustrated about it, but not necessarily plugged in. And so that's research from the Knight Foundation. So there's a lot of, you know, inaction happening, and I understand it. I don't want to shame people for it, but one thing that we can do that's very tangible is to become aware of the ballot initiatives in your state. So there's voter guides that your state will issue. At least in California, when you get your mail-in ballots, you also get a voter guide, and you can go through and be like, okay, what does this mean? Some of those things are very difficult to understand. Remember that maybe you are in a context where you have to vote in a certain way or have to put on like you're voting in a certain way. When you get to the ballot box, you're able to really, you know, express your values and your truth. But maybe you also have friends that you can talk it through. Like, just remember how it was in school, like going through a quiz, be like, what did you get for number 3? Okay, well, what does number 3 mean? What are the consequences of number 3? Because it's not just something on your grade, it's actually gonna dictate, you know, whether or not we have a, you know, a humane response to the unhoused population in Los Angeles, for example, with Prop 36. There's just so many different ways to activate and to show up. And so knowing those ballot initiatives is essential. But when somebody says, oh, I'm not going to vote, and they have the privilege and ability to vote, which in the United States, it is a privilege, especially because, you know, formerly incarcerated people can't vote.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, say what you want about the top of the ticket, but there's literally so much you're leaving on the table by not participating in that. So these ballot initiatives, knowing what's going on in your state, if you want to vote in a certain way, like I'm sure that, like, you know, there's so many different guides, so many different organizations that can help you vote along with your values, but also do that critical thinking yourself. But to really just understand that the top of the ticket is really just the beginning, but it's an iceberg. And there's a lot of iceberg down there. And so you don't want to be like the Titanic. You don't want to get hit. So you got to make sure that you stay aware, get your life jacket on, make sure you turn out to vote.
That's right.
You bringing up that local stuff is so, so real. Because we have, I mean, every day I see memes about the presidential election. Every day, you know, we're talking about it. It's so important. But the vast majority of people do not know what's going on in their local elections, do not know what's going on in their areas. And those are when it really impacts your life. Like, you're complaining about that road being terrible every day. It sucks. And like, this is a way to tangibly change it. And so I think that that local election piece is something that's really being missed out on from voter education.
And I do want to say that a lot of these ballot initiatives are written in a way that is intentionally dense, intentionally jargony, because they're trying to disenfranchise folks. They're trying to prevent people from, you know, knowing their own political power. The reason why people feel like their vote doesn't matter is on purpose. And so I can say all this stuff, but trust me, like, and not just trust me, trust history. U.S. voting has really been defined by suppression and keeping people out of the system. And so if you have the ability to vote and it's simply like you filling out a form online, please do it.
Yeah.
If not, like, if not for you, do it for me. Because I'm not trying to raise my kids, you know, when I do have my kids under Project 2025.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. Yeah, and it really, I'm thinking about what you said about the 1% of people who are doing the book banning. Like, that's how people who are such a tiny percentage of the population get so much power in this way. Like, you know, we're always talking about how my mom will always be like, Americans, like, America's gone to shit. I don't know what's going on. What is going on with these Americans? And I'm like, it's so true. And also, the vast majority of American people don't think that we should be banning books. Like, this is a minority who's pushing extremist, radical takes.
Yeah.
And then they get power because
they got the free time to be showing up to these PTA meetings.
Every day. Like, they are literally at every single meeting. They're literally at every type of gathering. And so they're just building up their connections and their power. And it's scary, right? But it is about the privilege of being able to show up in all of those places, which the vast majority of us are taking care of our families and working and doing what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And so it's just interesting how quickly a small percentage of folks can really make some detrimental things possible in our community. So making sure that we're looking at it all the way down the ballot is absolutely key.
Yeah, You're right. Like, I get it. If you're putting food on the table, if you're just worried about healthcare, like the day-to-day things always take precedent over this bigger structure. And so it's so intentional to be able to keep us complicit.
Absolutely.
You spoke a little bit about voter suppression. Do you want to speak a little bit more to kind of what voter suppression looks like in this country and who's it impacting?
I mean, voter suppression can look like so many different things. One thing that we have in the United States is we don't get time off. Some states require employers to give time off to their workers, but that's not something that's like federally mandated. It's not, certainly not paid time off. And so looking at how voter suppression can happen, it could be like, okay, well, if I don't do this work, I can't go to the polls, or a polling place that's only open from like noon to 2 o'clock. And so something that you can do, you talked about your grandmother being a poll worker, that's an essential part of the fabric of this electoral process. Being a poll worker means that you're greeting people at the door, helping them, check their IDs, helping them read the voter guides, not influencing their vote. That is completely unacceptable. That's also voter suppression, and also not being intimidated to do those things. And you can't wear like specific political signage when you're doing it. And so it's really about making sure that people can cast their ballots. So I did a big push with Power the Polls to make sure that my audience, my smarties as I call them, were able to become poll workers in their neck of the woods. And it's really very simple. Like if you are maybe bilingual, if you're tech literate, if you know how to send an email on a laptop, you are overqualified. Please show up to do that. And it's paid in most contexts, and you only have to be 16 or 17 to do it. So there's a lot of ways to fight against it. But voter suppression can also look like these narratives of, oh, you shouldn't care about your vote, the apathy. But I also think sometimes it can even come, like I was talking about earlier, from like the civic action lens, where people are like, oh, well, young people don't want to vote. Okay, well, how about we just assume that they just don't know how, and we'll give them that information. So there's a whole kaleidoscope of voter suppression, which I know you know all too well.
I mean, voter suppression is, it's so insidious, right? Like the way that they like really work this out. When we think about gerrymandering, when we think about, putting laws on the books at our state legislatures that say that, voter ID laws, like all of these are very specific ways, in particular here in the South, that we have seen voter suppression show up, right? Gerrymandering is when they start to cut the lines in your state to look a different kind of way, to move more people to one side or another side, to give more power to how folks are being able to vote and like who then gets those seats in those places. So it's very, very interesting. And then, a couple of years ago, and we've seen this like happen so much throughout the South, these voter ID laws, right? Like putting that at our state legislatures, and us not, again, because we're not paying attention to, always paying attention to not just the top of the ballot, but how everything is working at the state level. These laws are put in place, which is making it difficult for folks, who may have a different type of ID or didn't know that that was even a thing. So there's all these ways they try to catch people up. And this is just, it takes us back to a history. Recently I went to, the museum in Montgomery, Alabama, right? And I was walking through like the history of just like the South and slavery, but then also like getting to the part where the voting rights work was really coming in. And they had this display where you had to like test yourself to be able to make this vote as a Black person. So they had a jar of like jelly beans, and you had to say how many jelly beans were in that glass. And if you did not guess the right number, because who's gonna guess the right number of jelly beans in a glass, then, oh, sorry, you can't make this vote, you can't make your vote happen. So I mean, there's been, it's historic, it's deeply historic, the ways that these different types of voter suppression tactics have been used, and it's just been growing and mounting up for far too long. So we have to pay attention to them because they're very targeted and specific about the ways that you're trying to push the vote back.
Absolutely.
So I've heard you both bring up like an understandable amount of disheartenedness that people are experiencing around the electoral system. I guess I'm curious to kind of deep dive into that. Like, what would you say to people who are feeling disheartened by the idea of voting? Because it's coming from our communities too, Like I hear all the time people that I really respect and admire who will not be going to the polls, and then people who I really respect and admire who are fighting all day, every day to get people to polls. And I'm not really sure what to do with those two things at the same time,
Yeah. I want to say that's real, and I want to just acknowledge that people are tired, people are hurt, people are constantly seeing violence in our country. They're seeing violence around the globe. Like, it is really impacting us at a very deep level. We've gone through a global pandemic. We're still managing and trying to figure out how to live within this pandemic. Like, we have been hit in so many ways. And so for folks to now think about, you want me to make this decision about folks who Historically, I've not seen our government move in the ways I've needed them to. I don't know if I want to do that. So I just want to acknowledge that that is real and it's coming from a place of pain and trauma. And that is something that we're constantly having to work on. And what I'm grateful for, and I think that we need to uplift more, is that there are people who are really trying to get to the heart of that. Like, so shout out to the healers and the folks who are doing that type of work in our community, because we need to actually have that as a foundation for folks, right? To be able to really support that energy that they're holding that really may be pushing them into that, I don't want to do that place, right? But what I've been telling folks who are in that position is that you actually make decisions every single day.
That part.
You know how to make a decision, right? So this isn't something that you don't know how to do. You have to make decisions around things that you may not like all the time. And this is one of those decisions that's actually going to have huge implications on your life and on the future of this country. So I'm not asking you to do something that you don't do. I'm asking you to do the very thing that you do all the time. And I'm asking you to do one that's, again, going to have such a huge impact on the way we are able to move. And so when I put it to people like that, oh, you're just asking me to make a decision, just make a decision. We make it. We do them. And we've, and I even make it funny with some of my friends, like, you made a decision around somebody you wanted to date that you didn't really stick with for a long time, but you thought in that moment that that was going to be your boo. And then you made a different decision, right? But you know how to do this, And so I think that has really helped people to just like ground themselves a little bit more by just acknowledging, because I don't think it's fair for us not to acknowledge that people are in pain, right? And just tell people, forget that, just go vote. It's actually not fair to people, right? And it doesn't give people, it doesn't make them feel safe to actually even do the thing that you need them to do. So that's why I wanted to acknowledge that first. And I wanted to give a shout out to those folks who are holding that type of work in our communities, because they are essential to this process right now. But what I tell people is that it's about making a decision, good people. And we know how to do that. So make one that's going to actually make your life better than what it is now. And when you make that decision, it ain't over. You think that you still got to do the work. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's how it is in any part of our life. So I tell people I'm going to make the decision that feels right for me, and I'm going to continue to fill the gap by doing the work that is most important to me to make sure that I hold those people accountable.
Right. Yeah, because no decision's perfect, right? Like I have never met a politician that I feel like, wow, those align with all my values. No. I feel seen. I feel represented. No, that's not happening. But what can happen is this person represents me better than the other person or differently than the other person. And so I'm going to make a harm reduction decision. I think that I don't know, framing it like that has really helped me in that way of just being able to be like, I'm not going to be able to pick the person who perfectly aligns with all my values, but I can do a harm reduction process and I can make the world a slightly less terrifying place to live in for myself and for the people around me.
So I think, exactly what you said. You can't really convince anyone of anything if you don't hear them out and help them feel like you can relate to where they are. Exactly. Even if you can't totally. This is a messaging strategy, but it's also just a good human thing to do is be like, I see where you're coming from, or tell me why you feel that way and try to understand it in that way before being like, well, here's what I want to tell you. Because that can actually be very colonial in my opinion, to be like, oh, I'm going to dismiss the heck out of what you said and here's what I said and it's better and I'm going to assume that you don't know these things. It makes a lot of assumptions and it's not fruitful. I think about, history. I think about how when we look at what made different initiatives across the civil rights movement, Black Power movement, women's liberation, LGBTQ plus liberation, which was just the gay and lesbian liberation movement at the same time, even though trans folks were always there. Period. We saw the mixture of policy actions, institutional actions, electoral actions, as well as people in the streets. And I get really frustrated with folks who say the most radical thing you can do is lay your body on the ground, because yes, that is a radical and important thing, but it's also incredibly dehumanizing. It can also be, I've experienced this myself where I felt so equipped to, go out to the streets. I got arrested in 2016 at a protest. But the aftermath, that healer work is so important because I had felt like, okay, well now I literally can't go to a protest anymore because it's psychologically traumatizing to me. I guess I can't do anything else. And that's just not the case. There are so many different ways and tactics and means. And I think about the words of Dr. Terrence Roberts, who was one of the Little Rock Nine to integrate schools in Little Rock, Arkansas. And he said, do what you do it well, and do it for justice. And it's so essential because we have to figure out what we can do in our lane. And I also think the words of Preston Mitchum, who said, like, not voting and not doing anything else, losing strategy. Voting and not doing anything else, losing strategy. And he had this whole list of things, but it really came to us needing to look at our system comprehensively, to look at the fact that voting isn't, you know, in California, it's pretty easy. You get the mail in. If you have a fixed address, you fill out your ballot, you mail it in. But for some places, you got to stand outside for up to 8 hours, you know, on these long lines. Like, my thing is, if you want to see where the action's happening, if we want to look at this like comprehensive, multi-platform like way to get involved in our system, it has to be part of the toolbox if you have the ability to, because not everyone does. I will not be allowing, well, I'm going to try not to, like myself, but I feel like people start speaking up about the Electoral College like 3 months before the election and then never again. Or we see folks talk about third-party candidates for 3 months before the election and then never again. No, I want to see up and down ballot. Like, if we're really going to be like that, we need to be like that, you know, and it has to be comprehensive. And so that's what I've tried to do. But it was also really hard to feel encouraged because you see all this trauma and all this, you know, pain, like you were saying, and it's holding that truth and simultaneously trying to reframe it in a way. I'm not saying that you voting, like, you know, some people will say that voting in this system makes you complicit in this system. Well, paying taxes in this system makes you complicit in this system. We want to get down to it. So we make decisions every day, some of them against our will because you have the threat of carceral punishment if you don't pay those taxes. But we make these decisions. We are complicit in these things. And then opting out of this thing, like, it is not it's not the radical politic we think it is, but we have folks calling Dr. Angela Davis a sellout now because she's talking about how she's going to be voting. Yeah. And so I think there's a big misunderstanding. I think that people like to say big, tall words online, but the action doesn't always come through. So I always look at, you know, where are the feelings coming from? How can we mitigate that? But I'm also not here to push people against what their conscience and their values are telling them to do. I'm just here to provide information. And so if I can provide information that will be compelling to someone, beautiful. But I'm not going to handhold somebody all the way to the polls.
I really appreciate that framework. The way that you're talking about it as a tool in your toolbox is so helpful to just kind of address it as one of the many things that we can do, because liberation and justice is a giant puzzle, and everyone has a role in it, and and that role can be making sandwiches. Like, I think that, like, yeah, there's this idea that you have to be in the streets, like, body down, but, like, those people need to eat. So make a sandwich. Like, those people need a ride to the poll. Like, there's just so many different ways to be involved. And it makes me think also about my role before I came to SisterSong. I was working with students who were involved in the juvenile justice system, which was really beautiful. And I loved what I did. And also, it kind of felt like I was working in, like, survival, because a lot of it was about teaching them how to talk in an interview, how to dress for an interview to be able to get into a field that will be able to pay better, which is a wonderful thing and did change a lot of lives. At the same time, in a lot of ways, we were teaching them how to talk and present as white as possible, or as, like, most conditioned, most well put up in this version of themselves that will get hired. And so, like, that didn't feel good sometimes. And also, how many lives are better because of it. And so I think a lot about, like, that grapple, that push and pull between, like, the survival work and this liberation work, this justice work. And I think that voting is just one more piece of that puzzle, where it's not gonna fix system. It's not going to explode everything. It's not this radical act that is movement creating, but it does do something, and it is relevant, and it does change people's lives in that moment. Survival work is important too.
So even in voicing that, it makes me, you know, reminded of the fact that if we're going to talk about these systems, yes, systems are made up of people. Yes, people can be complicit in systems. But if we are talking about a marginalized person who is trying to survive a system and teach other marginalized people how to navigate a supremacist system, where we know that if you have a white sounding name, you will get callbacks on your resume. That has been found. Harvard studies, Cambridge studies, they know this to be true. So you're helping folks to navigate this system, and then somehow there's this guilt of being complicit in the system. It's not a system you created. And so I think it's that dual role, that double consciousness, as it were, you know, to be able to, like, be cognizant of how we survive a system while also saying this is a bullshit system that shouldn't exist, that I didn't create. And it's like, well, how do I get to these places and do these things where I can dismantle that? Does it look like, you know, having an incredible podcast that is very, you know, intellectual, but it's still called Fuck, Marry, Kill, because we want to make it accessible to the people. We still want to do the thing while we're talking about it. And so I think so many folks feel, and honestly, I think it's this very supremacist idea, white supremacist idea, that either you do this or you don't do that. If you are an activist, you're a martyr, which means that you don't got any nice clothes, that you only eat the bare minimum of what you need to eat to survive. Instead of like, no, if I want to have like a nice dinner, I can make sure that the workers there are being paid ethically, that the sourced ethically, that we can do these things in an ethical manner. But the whole, burn it all down, well, I think that we need folks with that liberation politic as well. I think we need folks who are looking at how to make people's tomorrows better today. And I also think about comment number 1 by Gil Scott Heron about how, I want a good home and a wife and children and some food to feed them every night. And you want me to overthrow what? And so in our liberation politic, we can't leave behind the people who are most harmed by the system. We have to figure out a way how to navigate it while also trying to heal it. And so when I talk about that, it's like, oh, well, reform versus abolition. But I think we have to be able to have those conversations. But one thing that we can't do is make those conversations so inaccessible that people don't even know where they lie within the framework.
That's exactly, and pit people against each other, depending on what side they land on. And I think that is a culture that we're up against now, and where it's like, how down are you? Right? And if you're not as down as we feel like the most down person should be, then you're an op, or you're not on our side. And I think that is so counterproductive to liberation work. I think it's so counterproductive to that. And I think that what I had when I've studied, all these different movements and how these movements have created the different changes that they had, and also the challenges that they had, right? What was at the root of all of that is that at some point they all had to come to the table together, right? And recognize where their strengths were, identify where they were, having those challenges, and decide like, what is more important here? Are we going to fight each other about where, you may like this and I may like that? Or are we actually going to put all of our energy towards the thing that's going to move us all further towards liberation? And I think that is what we have to really focus people in on. And I think the way that you were just laying that out around just like, there's so many different ways that you can do this work and be in this work. And I want all of those ways to feel good for people, and for them to feel honored in whichever way works for them, and not feel a way because it may not be a way that somebody else is doing it.
And that's so true. Like, I remember in 2020, I started, Smarter in Seconds, which is teaching people about different social issues. And, well, at the time it was like 15 seconds or less. Now, thank goodness, it's 90 seconds, but still in little bitty times. And people were like, well, what are you really doing for the movement? And I was just like, well, here's the picture of me getting arrested, since that seems to be the only way you respect folks.
Listen.
And let me tell you how traumatic it was, and how when we did sue the police last year and won, like, it was this thing of, okay, well, we want to feel honored and held. That was some of the most traumatizing work of my life. I had to be sedated damn near the entire trial. And so it's like, I'm going to try it. What works for me is being this like Miss Frizzle meets LeVar Burton on the internet. And it works for me.
It's so good,
and I get to dress like this. I get to wear, purple eyeshadow and purple lipstick and purple earrings and I get to do it, And it makes me still so much safer in my mind and in my body. But I still feel that people are being pushed towards this very traumatic way of surviving these systems. And it really troubles me, because it's like, who is that serving?
It's serving the system.
100%.
That's actually what the system wants us to do.
The system wants us to get burnt out by 25 and fall in line and get a corporate job and never speak of radicalization or movements again. And but it's like, it's not what's worked.
No.
It's not beneficial.
No.
And so, I literally I was like, so somebody's telling you not to do this or to do this. If somebody's telling you that there's only one way towards liberation, that's the real op.
Listen, say that.
And who gets hurt the most? Like, when we choose to not show up for the little guy, like, it's like the most marginalized people are the ones who get hurt the most when we decide not to show up because we're trying to be woker than the next person.
Yeah. This is so good. I think this is going to help a lot of people. Just even this little situation.
I'm saving so much money on therapy right now.
Listen. And it's also helping me because I feel like, as an auntie now, because I've been in this social justice work for over 20 years, right? And I started as that very loud, rambunctious, throw myself in the street, throw myself into whatever kind of person, right? And I love those years. They were incredible. Now that I'm in my 40s, I feel the impact of what those years have had on my body, one. And I now know that my position and my place in the movement is different. And I've had to grieve, actually, those old parts of myself, because, there is a part of me that still wants to, and I feel like I want to like hold on to that. And so I think that we have to have more conversations around the evolution of our social justice lives, for those of us who get politicized in this way. And we have to also allow time for folks to grieve those old parts and accept, you know, what their new positions may be or their new lanes may be, and really be okay with the whole process. And so for us doing that, that then gives us all different places to be able to open our arms and welcome new people in at whatever level they're ready to come in at. Because we gotta have the guards ready to, like, you know, welcome people in. Like, I'm a church girl, right? And Black church girl, honey. And my first job in the church was to be an usher. Right? Before I was even in the choir, I was an usher. And so I remember that being such an important role to, like, be on guard, to be standing there to welcome these folks into this space. And so we got to make sure that we have strong soldiers at every front, whether you want to be in the streets, we got the people ready to welcome you there. You want to come in and say that I am a good content creator, I know how to create some beautiful things, then we got strong soldiers ready and open for you there. We got to make sure we give people all the different entry points and not, you know, try to make one of those entry points better than the other.
It's so true. And I think I've had that same mourning process. Like, I went to the Gender Liberation March recently.
Yeah.
I was so emotionally dysregulated. Oh my goodness. I don't know how we missed it, but there were a lot of folks there, which was beautiful.
There were a lot of people there, yeah.
But I was so emotionally dysregulated that somebody who follows me online came and gave me a fidget toy. They're like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "Nope, thank you for this," you know? But I was so activated. And I feel like I can't even go to a march where they got a permit.
Yeah.
Like, who have I become? And it sucks, but I also think we can't put voting on a pedestal either. Yes, voting is important, but it's not the only thing. Yes, you know, being in the streets is important, but it's not the only thing. And it's not to dismiss one or over elevate another. It's just to look at all of it together. But I do feel that intensely as well, because, you know, I literally couldn't go to a protest for years after. And even when I do go, I almost have a panic attack. So clearly that's not how I should show up. It's not how my body wants me to show up. So I have to show up in the ways that I can. And I think everyone does. And empowering people to learn that about themselves is also a beautiful process.
It is.
Because it helps us live in the world that we want to create.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think what you're saying too about having opportunities to have people jump in all different outcomes too is also so relevant to reproductive justice, just how many different entrance points there are to RJ. Like, I think about, you know, you can talk to somebody and maybe they're not ready for the abortion conversation yet. Maybe that word scares them. Okay, there's other ways in. Let's talk about maternal health. Let's talk about, do you care about the maternal mortality rate? Okay, that's your entrance. Do you care about police brutality? Okay, that's your entrance. Like, there's just so many different opportunities to get involved in reproductive justice. And then once you find your home there, then you can branch out into all the different amazing ways that reproductive justice can impact our lives. But having those multiple entrance points just gives us opportunities to connect with so many more people.
Absolutely.
So then going off of that, what do you think is the connection between reproductive justice and our democracy?
They are, I mean, it's just like, I don't know, what's the word? I think everything is the best word. Like, they are inextricably linked to each other. You can't talk about democracy in this country and not talk about reproductive justice. Like, you can't separate them from each other. Like, us being able to make our own decisions about our bodies, our families, therefore for me, our futures, is directly linked to who is in office, who is holding power, who we are allowing to, like, help us move through policies and things that are going to be able to, like, directly connect to us making those decisions about our bodies and families and futures. It is all connected. Like, sometimes, you know, Audre Lorde has told us this over and over again, and every opportunity I have to say it, I'm going to say it, that we can't have single issue movements because we do not live single issue lives. And so when we think about keeping democracy over here and reproductive justice over here and voting rights over, like, the way that we are, like, conditioned to compartmentalize in that way is just, our silos don't save us at all, right? And so when people ask me that question, which I think is an important one to ask, I'm always saying that it is all connected. They depend upon each other. And that's the best way I'll say it. They depend upon each other.
100%. You don't have a populace without reproductive justice. And we've, like, even the way that the anti-abortion extremist movement has been alienating people who require IVF. It's like, so do you want the babies or not? You know, like,
they don't know.
They don't know. That's better. Like, they don't care.
They just want to control people's bodies. They just want to make our lives miserable. And it's really diabolical. You know, I was reading a post recently. I was like, everything's diabolical now. I'm like, yes, because everything's diabolical now. Everything. But it's so connected. And I even think about, like, you know, even connecting other issues. Like, I've recently been working with the Nuclear Threat Initiative, and I learned that, you know, there's something called the nuclear football, and the president of the United States has the sole authority to annihilate the world with push of a button with nuclear codes.
what?
Yeah, no, truly, it's
Wait,
called
what?
a nuclear. Let me break it down. Okay. So essentially, like, you want to really talk about about reproductive justice? This is a miracle any of us are alive and that anything happens right now, because the literal president of the United States, since I think before Reagan, has a suitcase and a guy who walks around with the suitcase, and it's called the nuclear football, which makes it sound too fun. Like, what the heck? And it literally has nuclear codes, and the president has a sole authority. If the president decides that it could happen. And people are like, no, there's checks and balances. There's been 2 checks, like there's been 2 near misses. One time, Nixon got super drunk, and he was like, they literally had to have protocols. And then also Clinton, so still bipartisan, right? The red and the blue, because the problem is the fact that that exists. Clinton sent the nuclear codes off in a coat that went to the dry cleaner. And so you want to talk about reproductive justice and democracy. They're about to start doing nuclear testing in the United States in the next 5 years. And that's literally on the ballot right now. And it's like, I have the privilege of being able to make PSAs about that. And I'm going to do it in like this fun 1950s style, like, oh, doesn't it just make you want to scream? Because it does. And it's going to be very cute, and I Love Lucy, but it's going to educate people. And so when we think about reproductive justice, the right to live, to be alive in a country that kills its own people via the death penalty, that, you know, police violence, policing in general, prisons in general, it is such, democracy is how we can change those things. But the fact that we as people are able to speak up about it is democracy within itself. And so I think that even when, going back to your example talking about reproductive justice, like when we talk about the conversation on abortion, it's not just the doctor who's providing it. It's about the people who have, you know, worked on the policies to make sure that that can still happen. The people who are, or not yet. Well, let's focus on the positive.
Okay. Thank you.
The people who are standing outside of the clinics, helping people to feel safe, the abortion funds, people who are having that conversation. But I went for years working in reproductive justice where I couldn't even say the word abortion because people would completely turn their ears off. And so it's like, how can we reach all of those people on all these different issues without feeling too overwhelmed? Because it is dire, it is terrifying, but if we can provide solutions, you know, to try to talk about these different things. So once again, it's inextricably linked, but when we talk about like the right to life and living and a good life and justice, we have to, it's everything. It's even nuclear. It's everything.
It is nuclear. Wow.
I don't understand how we're still alive. Like, I just feel
No,
like
truly, it's a miracle. Amen.
Amen.
Like, I would have gotten drunk and pushed it. If I was president, I would have gotten drunk and pushed it.
You know,
I like actually, I'd be like, I don't believe you, haha.
It's not real.
It's not real. There's no way it's real. That's crazy.
Yikes.
No, it's real. But no, if we don't laugh, we will cry. You know.
Let's keep laughing then.
Ooh.
Well, okay, I'm gonna wrap us up then. What's making you guys go to the polls? What is drawing you there?
Honestly, for me, you know, I'm planning to be pregnant, like, you know, what is it, January 1st, getting off my birth control, we're gonna have babies, everybody's so excited, and, you know, inshallah, it will go well. I'm not trying to raise these children. First of all, it's terrifying to be a black woman in the United States planning a pregnancy with the maternal mortality rates that we have, and we see all the outcomes. Even one of my sisters recently, she gave birth, and they had to admit her back into the hospital, but even a doctor was trying to dismiss her pain, and there was fluid in her lungs. Like, this is, it's terrifying how dire and treacherous it is, and I think if it's this bad already, we know what they're going to do. We have Project 2025. Like, it's not like it's secret. And so the evil geniuses have given, no, genius is a strong word. The villains have provided their evil plan. It's available online to read. And what disheartens me is still lack of action, but I try to focus on people who are taking action. So for me, it's not just voting, you know, but it is very personal for myself, but also in my future. But just the fact that, like, for example, there's a proposition in Los Angeles that has a very carceral approach to trying to fix the issue of homelessness. And it looks very violent and looks very dangerous. And so it's about bringing my value and my humanities into one of the few ways that we have a direct way to speak to the people who are making the laws that I don't want this to happen. I do not stand for this. And I hope more people see it that way.
Absolutely. Yay for bringing babies. I love this. I still haven't made that decision, but I love for those folks who have. But what's driving me to the polls, what's making me want to vote, always my grandmother, Mabel Haley, is in my head. So anytime there's an election, I feel like she is like sitting on my shoulder, like, you better go. You know, so that's number one. But number two, you know, I am really blessed, because I take my auntie life very seriously, to have some of the cutest, most beautiful, like, smartest little kids in my world, right? But I'm so honored to be a part of their village. And so I just want to name Mecca, and I want to name Abigail, and my nephews, right? I see these kids and I see how brilliant they are already. And so my question to myself is, who am I to not try to make sure I'm creating the best possible world for them to have, for them to grow up to be their best selves, right? Every time I look in their face, that's exactly what I think about. So I think about everything that I'm doing, and voting is absolutely one of them. And so that's what's really driving me, is that I really want to do my part to make sure that I am at least making the best decisions I can that is leading us to a better world. And the other thing I'll say in another kind of way is, you know, my whole life I have been fighting against this white supremacist, sexist, patriarchal, all these systems, right? And in this election season, at the top of the ballot, there is an image of someone who actually embodies all the things that I've been fighting against my entire life. And for me to be able to say that I unequivocally can make a decision to not make that be an image that continues to move in this world, it actually feels like I'm doing my job. You know? So those are the things that's making me say, I can't wait to get in line to do what I need to do and get my sticker in Georgia.
I love that. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Oh, I wasn't going to vote, but now y'all convinced me. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote.
I can finally go to sleep now.
I'm doing it for the sticker.
No sleep till November.
Oh, well, thank you all so much for having this conversation. I really think this had an impact on the world and on the voting scene in America.
I feel better.
Me too. Me too. Thank you, Simran.
We'll see you guys at the polls.
See you there.